Bad assumptions for a street fight. I get sent tons of videos of other instructors showing some sort of a technique or some sort of an application to street fighting. And I'm always asked my opinion of it. And again, I'm very consistent about the difference between a fight and violence. And they're very different things, and you have to train very differently for both of them. So I'm going to go into that. I'm going to show you a popular video that was going around, and I will show you my thoughts on it. And I'm going to take one of probably the most infamous people right now on the internet, because you know me, I believe a lot of the best information comes from the worst parts of society. And I'm going to let them tell you a story and why you might want to consider other alternatives to looking at how to protect yourself in a violent situation on the street. But hey, before we do that, if you are ready to get you and your family off to the year with a plan to minimize the chance of violence entering into your life, go to timlarkin.com, give us your email. We will start sending you information correctly right away that will handle this. It will be uncensored because, as you know, we have to be careful what we put up here. But you need the real information and you need it directly, and that's where you can get it at timlarkin.com. I have to put a caveat on everything. I'm about to show a BJJ instructor talking about street fighting. It will be jumped to conclusion that somehow I'm anti-BJJ or I'm calling it saying it's worthless. All my kids are training in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I have tons of friends that are in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I love it. I actually train, getting my butt kicked on a daily basis by some very good practitioners. So I have utmost respect for it. There are limitations to some of the applications, just like there's limitations to everything that we do. But there is a trend going around where a lot of people are showing street fighting techniques using Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and how they do this. And I'm just going to make a couple of comments on it. So I'm going to show this one instructor, no disrespect to him. He's showing, excellent technique. He seems like a really nice guy, and I'm sure he believes this is a good way to do things for what he's imagining. And that's what we got to talk about, is what are you imagining? So let's get to it.
This is probably the absolute worst position you can be in a street fight. Part one, when he...
Okay, so that's the idea is he's talking about a street fight. To me, this looks more like a schoolyard type of a situation. Somebody's on top of you. It's something that, especially in BJJ, they're very comfortable with because this is how they, on a rolling basis, this is where they find themselves in positions like this all the time. Now, what are the assumptions he's making here? He goes, this is the worst position. Now, he's saying it's the worst position from a standpoint of the two guys, but there's more to it. Let's keep going.
Start trying to punch. I've got to make sure my hands are up to try to defend as much as I can. Very bad position for me. What I want to do is I want to bring my feet up and use my hips to try to launch him this way. And what I'm going to do here, as I stop him from punching, because I'm going to overhook him. This is going to keep him from hitting me with that hand. Now, I take this foot, trap this foot, this hand, and I'm going to hit him with like a big right hook and knock him over the arm I have trapped.
Let's look at what he just did. No problem. He's based on the floor. He decides to buck his hips, get the guy off of him. That's actually pretty good. He's in a better position as far as the planet's concerned. His center of gravity is lower than the other guys. But again, what are they assuming the whole time on this? They're assuming one-on-one, which in street violence, that's just not the case. As I've always said, you have to consider that getting in violence in the street, you have to always plan for multiple attackers. Those attackers are going to be bigger, faster, and stronger, and they're probably going to be carrying tools, things like knives, guns, clubs. One of the worst positions you can find yourself is on the ground, not in the dominant or non-dominant ground position. It's being on the ground itself. It's just a bad place to be. So what's the assumption this guy is showing the whole time? He's assuming one-on-one. And that's where I see most of these instructors. They come in, they're assuming it's just me and this one guy, and we're talking about a quote-unquote fight. We're not talking about violence. And I think it just leaves you with some principles that work in the dojo. They work in the cage. They're going to be really dicey on the street, because on the street, you're going to be dealing with all the unknowns, all the black swan events, all the things that you don't have to worry about in the dojo and in the street. Also, look at the surface they're training on. What are they training on? They're training on a matted surface. So it's easy to move around, easy to slide around, easy to do some of these things. If he was barefoot on the street doing this, it would be extremely painful for him to do it. He'd be ripping his skin. There's all sorts of things that are not being considered here. And the only reason I'm criticizing this is because they're specifically saying a street fight, and not because they're training jiu-jitsu or what he's showing is incorrect or jiu-jitsu or anything like that, or ineffective. As far as violence is concerned, everything he showed basically, except for the bucking of the hips and stuff, requires strength. Everything he showed requires manipulation. I haven't seen a direct one-to-one injury, meaning the movement that you take results in an injury on them, going to a vulnerable part of the human body. I see things that require you to use your strength, technique, nothing going straight into an area that gets you an immediate result, which is critical when your life is on the line in the street.
They're always your go-to. Sometimes they're a little strong and I can't buck them enough to be able to make this work. So what I'm going to do is he's trying to hit me, my hands are up. I'm bucking a little bit. I want to go right here. As I go here, guys, there's space I've created from bucketing.
If he's talking about some sort of a schoolyard scrap or something and nobody really wants to, do damage to each other, okay, what he's doing right now is there. But look, their heads, look how close their heads are. Nobody's going for any of the vital areas that are easily available, easily reachable, and could actually end the contest and get you back up on your feet very quickly. Again, the thought process is I'm in a quote unquote fight. It's me and him. I don't have to worry about anybody else. And therefore I can take my time to get a result. And I can play with the idea that I'm going to rely on strength. Everything here still requires strength. He said, okay, if the guy's too big and I can't buck him off, I'll use this, where I'm going to start banging into his hip crease. Still requires strength. And it's not actually an area that's going to get him an immediate result. Why? Because they're not going into an area that's causing trauma. And again, that's exactly what you want to do when your life's on the line. I am talking about true violence on the street, not a scrap, not two guys that are just trying to ego out, that really don't want to hurt each other. I'm assuming if he's talking street fight, he's talking about criminal violence and the potentiality for real injury, if not death. And so I'm taking it under those conditions.
I'm going to push on the hips and I'm going to make space. He's still going to try to continue to punch me. And that's why I'm coming up and I'm going to try to control here. I have distance I can create here. I have submissions that I can attack here.
And so that's his two options for being on the street in this particular position. Never address the fact that there might be multiple attackers. Never address the fact that you're tying up all of your limbs on one person, and absolutely no situational awareness in a quote-unquote street fight. And that's the problem. I'm going to play a clip from currently the most infamous man on the internet, Andrew Tate. He was interviewed a while back, but the blunt terminology that he's using and saying, this has been more eloquently stated by guys like Jeff Thompson that I've had on here. Anybody that's dealt with real violence on the street absolutely talks about these tenets that Tate's about to talk about. He's going to be a lot harder on BJJ. I'm not. I think you guys understand where I'm coming from here. This is not a criticism of a combat sport. This is just the application on the street on violence and saving your life. There's way more to consider once you step outside the dojo and once you step outside the ring. It's just unfortunate. It's just the real world enters in, and the real world can be inconvenient and unnecessary. There's a lot of stuff that you wish was going to happen, can't happen, because somebody could just come right up and kick you in the back of the head. So here's Tate. Let's see what he has to say.
Everyone loves BJJ and never shuts up about BJJ.
Facts.
BJJ. Let me tell you something. BJJ is absolutely useless outside of the cage or your dojo. It's useless on the street.
What is BJJ for people that
Brazilian
don't know?
Jiu-Jitsu. It's useless. You can't do a double leg takedown on concrete. You're gonna yourself. Even if you do take him down to the ground, many submissions don't work if he can bite or if he can scratch your eyes or if he can pull a knife. Thirdly, you don't know if he has friends. You're gonna take him to the ground, put him in an arm bar, and his friend's gonna kick you in the head or curb stomp you, and you're gonna die, right? The number one rule of street fighting is stay on your feet. Number one rule. You might need to run. You probably should run. Especially you hit a dude and he goes, run. You don't know, he might get up and draw. Well, what are you standing around for, right? So rolling around on the floor with some dude is amateur hour. And all these Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guys, every time I say this, like, no, BJJ, they're a bunch of dorks. It's useless. You could take the best BJJ guy in the world, put him against two normal men to have a street fight, and he'd struggle. He can't use what he knows because the other guy's just gonna start hitting him.
Harsh way for him to say it, and he's trying to be controversial, and he likes to call people out. But again, his message is actually spot on. What's he saying? He's saying that, listen, if you go on the street and you do some of the things that BJJ instructs you to do, which are designed for what? They're designed for the ring and they're designed for the dojo. They're also designed to assume a duel, one-on-one. They're not designed for multiple attackers. And a lot of people will yeah, but, just like Tate says on this. But listen, how many other times have I shown you, unfortunately, combat sport practitioners, many of them BJJ guys, who assume a duel type situation where they're focusing on one person on the street and they're oblivious to the rest. We had one poor guy got stabbed to the neck and killed. We had another guy get shot because he didn't understand the stakes that he was at. He used Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and then he let the guy up, and then the guy stands up and shoots. Again, people are not assuming true violence. When you step outside of the combat sport arena and you step outside of your training area, you are entering back into the real world where people respond with violence. The last statement that he talked about, two normal guys going up against combat practitioners. Yes, many times, two normal people that want to just do harm. Now, make me be very clear. They want to use violence, meaning they will grab a pipe. They will do something to do harm to an individual. They do very well with very unskilled uses of the tool of violence against very skilled practitioners in the combat sport world. Does not mean that the combat sport practitioner is weak or that he's somehow wrong or that they have to train with me to learn how to fight or any of that bullshit that everybody gets caught up in. That's not my criticism. My criticism is to think that something that applies in the world of combat sports where there are rules, there are methods, and there are assumptions that are extremely dangerous to take out on the street. Now, again, I'm the first one, as I've said many times, some of my best clients and students have been combat sport practitioners who understand this. I had Robert Drysdale on, a very famous Brazilian jiu-jitsu practitioner. I've had other guys on, and they all say the same thing. They go, hey, sometimes going to the ground is the worst thing that can happen in a self-defense situation. Does that mean they think jiu-jitsu is ineffective or anything? No, I'm not saying that. It's just, again, I keep getting these tapes, and again, I think it's just the context that everybody puts things in. You know, the context is always very favorable to whatever the combat sport or martial art is being shown, rather than you should always default to the realities of violence, as inconvenient as they are. And those inconvenient realities are often disappointing to everybody. But if you go around and you look at a situation and your assumptions are, I will be facing multiple attackers out here, most likely. Those attackers, I'm going to assume, are going to be bigger, faster, and stronger. I mean, that's just the basis. And the last thing that we look at is they're probably going to be carrying tools of some sort, weapons. And if you go with that assumption, you're going to have a very direct approach to the use of violence. And you're going to make sure that for each move that you make, that you get a result, a 1-to-1 ratio. Meaning, if I put my efforts to strike this part of the body, physiologically, I know what will happen to that person. I understand the result. You'll notice when the BJJ trainer was in the second position, where he was moving around, he said, okay, I'm just going to try to figure and control him here. Gave no specific information, just showed kind of a motioning of maybe a hand palm, maybe somewhere on the side of the head or something. No specific target, no specific result, just kind of, I'm going to kind of control him. That's when you need the most specific information. You need to know where to put those efforts. I appreciate you guys sending these in. I also hope everybody understands that combat sports are just the foundation of not only great training, it produces good people. And I got to say, my friends in the BJJ community are some of the best people in the world that I deal with. They're just outstanding individuals. It's an outstanding community. It's just this keeps coming up. And when it comes into the world of violence, you have to adjust. You have to adjust to realities. And oftentimes, the worst thing you can do is go to the ground. So listen, folks, until next time, remember, you want to get your plan together for you and your family, go to timlarkin.com, give us your email, and start putting again a plan that minimizes the chances of violence entering into your life. Until next time, all the best.